was yesterday,
This was
so apparently a
yesterday.
slime
I did not
can keep time better
did
than
not
you
talk
can.
about slime at all. It's ridiculous. Now,
Should hire that slime
Now,
girl. Keep the
Kathleen,
notebook.
apparently
Kathleen,
slime has better
what
memory than you because
I'm
you
gonna
can't
just
even
turn him down a
remember.
little bit.
Yeah. So, and this may be just saying the same thing over again, but something that stuck with me is and I don't remember. I think it was on a TV show or whatever, but it was an interesting turn of phrase. And this guy said, when we talk about morality, what we're talking about is how we interact with people directly. We're talking about morality is how we understand how to be a good parent, a good friend, a good neighbor. But we don't apply morality to society as a whole. When we want to talk about society, we talk about ethics and ethical constraints and things like that, which tell us how to deal with the world around us, the multitude of people, how the health and well-being of society should be understood, and whether or not decisions are ethical as it relates to that thing. And I found that to be a really interesting way to talk about and differentiate between what morality is and what ethics are. And it really kind of like, at least for me, had an effect on me when I started to think, okay, so when I think about morality, I'm thinking about how I treat my wife, how I treat my kids. Like, what do I think is the best way to do that? And then when I think about how I interact with general society, I'm not thinking about my own personal morals, but what I think society should look like. And that maybe some of the things that I believe are best for my personal life may not be good as it relates to the way that I interact with society at large. That may be just be saying the same thing again.
Yeah,
but
well, I think there's something to that. So there's good, like, empirical reasons to believe that we create dialogues, maneuvers, and strategies for very specific situations, and this goes for, like, ethics as well. Let's start with ethics. So, roughly speaking, you have a number of strategies that you think you should employ when in certain contexts. For example, every single person in this room right now, there's a number of things that they'll say and they don't say, and you have a self-representation that you employ for your Discord life, maybe even per room, right?
mm-hmm.
I present myself this way to this room, this way for another one, and here's the set of strategies that go with that, right? There are some people who are like, dude, I'm real all the time, whatever. Everybody is playing some sort of character in a Discord, on Discord, maybe even in each server. And with that, you've adopted a number of strategies for how you talk, and there are rules that you'll internalize for Discord, or again, for a particular Discord server.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe you didn't really have an opinion on doxing. Now you do. Here's the things that we say about that. Maybe there's a set of things that you would say about pornography in your home life that you don't say on Discord, or that you will say in Discord, but you won't say somewhere else. So you build up a set of intricate rules that you'll use on Discord, or again, just in this room, tied to a sort of character or personality that you want to project. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we can call some of those, this is what I ought to do, this is what I ought to say, but as a sort of character that you're not really tied to, but that's not the case. We actually know that people get very emotionally tied to these characters, and you'll get upset at things that you don't really get upset at unless you're in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, so I'm going to call that a sort of the Discord set of ethical rules, right? And you have that, and you're very emotionally tied to it, presumably. But you do other things when you're with your kids and with your family. You've got your own unique set of rules. And then let's say Kathleen goes to Washington, becomes a senator, right?
Hmm.
You now take on a new set of professional ethics that you project outwards, and you become very tied to these. But humans are actually it's very easy for them to switch between characters in different contexts. Now, if we were to take the word ethics or ought in each of those scenarios, they're likely not going to be compatible, right? It's an assumption that we're going to be able to find what's the same between all of those different ethical contexts and say, okay, this is the moral system that they hold and they just tinker with it. That is not the case. The same person generally holds ethical views that are contradictory in different contexts. So when we talk about the sort of, okay, maybe there's a difference between what I believe for myself, what I ought to do, and for what I envision society at large to do, the story is actually much more complicated. You don't have a theory of how you ought to be for yourself to be a good person. You have a theory of how you ought to be a good person in 100 different contexts, and it changes without you even knowing it.
That makes
So,
sense.
I
have a question
Yeah.
though. What I find a lot of times is somebody says, "Well, I'm a moral relativist," or I believe morals are relative. But then that person goes on to be moralistic and judgmental and moralizing about other people, when it seems to me that that's contrary to what they believe. If you think that morals are relative to a person, then that eliminates you being morally judgmental about their morals.
Being morally judgmental about other people, though, is there's no point in thinking about this in terms of like what's true or false. It's a strategy, right? Teaming up on somebody, like take Ace for example, right? I see Ace hiding down all the way at the bottom. It's common for people to like pounce on Ace and to jump on him and do these things and to say things about Ace. And it's not necessarily about, and I'm not going to use the word virtue signaling because that has negative connotations. It's very normal for us as like kind of a bonding exercise to pick on somebody like that and to shit on them. And the point is because we can strengthen our bonds. It's a very important practice. And the same thing goes, I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. When we browbeat somebody by moralizing, one of the things that we're doing is an implicit threat. As in, hey, if you want to be a part of the in-group, change your attitude, right? Change the way that you think about this, or at least how you act, or else you hear how I'm moralizing at you right now? This is a threat. We're not going to let you in.
It's also otherizing, right? It's telling that person that they're not in the group. I guess that's what you just said, isn't it?
They're not in the group. It's a threat that you're not going to be allowed in. It's a way to strengthen our own bonds. It makes us feel good about ourselves.
But there might be good reasons. There might be good reasons for keeping somebody out because they hold repugnant views.
Well, repugnant is an emotional response, and it's
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
and I'm positive that we are feeling.
But what else is there? It's not like we can say that there's anything true. All we have is that. That's all we have on moral relativism.
That's fine.
We don't have any arguments. So all we're left to is emotions.
What do you mean by argument?
Emotions and bullying. And that's the world.
But what do you mean by...
That's my objection to it. It just leaves us with emotions and will to power, bullying people. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's true.
I don't like...
That is what we're left with.
Yeah, that's not desirable to me.
Right.
Right.
So you're having a strong emotional response
Yeah.
to this.
I want something better that doesn't involve what I consider to be violence. You know,
Well,
I
the
consider
question though is,
bullying is a type of emotional violence, right?
but are you willing to? I mean, like, so here would be my question, right? Is it seems that if you held to this idea that there's something true in the universe that is like moral, that you would have to bully and be violent towards people in order to achieve your moral system.
I
If
think
you
there.
hold that, say, people who eat oranges, just horrible people, you are going to have to employ, at least with a threat of violence, against those people to bully them to prevent them from eating oranges. So you find yourself in the same situation that you are trying to stop, which is the will
But
to power.
but that's not how I adjudicate true sentences.
Well, a lot of times, though, what's happening in ethics isn't fact finding. It just, a lot of times, it just amounts to browbeating of some sort. For example, we're talking about abortion. We kind of pretend, we kind of fake like, hey, what we're really arguing about is some fact, right? The fact of whether it's a life, but really, the what we say in, oh yeah, well, a fetus is really human. Really, all we're doing is we're saying you shouldn't kill the fetus. That's really what it comes down to, right? And it's just restating our views at each other. There's really no fact there to be talked about. We agree on the facts. We know what the genetic makeup of embryonic cells are. We're not even really confused if they feel pain. All of that, we agree on all the facts, but we still have a disagreement. What could explain that? And that's what happens in ethics. We can make arguments if you want, but people just generally don't care about arguments in ethics.
Yeah, but it seems to me that I want to settle disputes, in this case about abortion, by rational discourse. And what you're telling me is I need to forget that, and I need to either marginalize them, remove them, or kill them. And then I win. I win.
No, that's not entirely
win.
true. It's actually, so what actually happens when we talk about abortion? We'll start talking about the effects of banning abortion, and what we do is we start laying out things in a relatively rational manner. Here's the effects of what you're saying, here's the effects of what I'm saying. Now that you've seen, you've pictured your 14-year-old daughter in an alleyway trying to give herself an abortion and bleeding out, don't you agree with me? Right? And somebody might say, yes, I've considered the evidence, and you know what? I hate the idea of a young girl doing that. I'd much rather she does that with a qualified medical personnel, instead. And so that's something that you can do that is in a sense rational, but you're not learning anything new per se. A lot of times what's involved in quote unquote arguments in ethics is just spinning up really word pictures, really visceral word pictures. Like, oh, you think the war in Iraq was justified? Let me show you pictures of
Dead babies.
Dead children in the streets. Right, which is a kind of, it really is emotional manipulation.
So can you have a conversation though, like take abortion? The way I kind of have always approached the abortion thing is, instead of looking for some right or wrong, just looking for an amenable compromise, right? So I've always held to the position that, even now as an atheist, that abortion is bad, that we shouldn't do it. But I recognize there are situations that arise where I couldn't hold like a principled stance on that. So I always said, all right, if my goal is to prevent abortion, then what is the most and what is the best and fastest way to achieve that goal? And it's not to say create laws that prevent people from having abortions, but to address the reason that abortion is necessary in the first place. So
Yeah, now that's actually an interesting point. So there's something else in this space, which is that of practical reason. So moral reasoning might be one thing. Practical reason says, what is your goal and what's the best way to get it? And if you find that what you want to do is reduce abortions because you think abortions are awful, then you might employ a bit of practical reasoning.
It seems
Practical reasoning is related to moral reasoning, but is more like a problem-solving task. Practical reasoning isn't a lot different than saying to yourself, I desire food. Well, I know I have food in the fridge, so I guess I better go to the fridge and get it. That's what practical reasoning is.
It seems a little Machiavellian to me. We're no longer engaged in rational discourse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to manipulate, control, and use propaganda techniques, emotional techniques, even cognitive social engineering techniques, in order to get you to come to my side. And I don't.
Well, you didn't learn that. You didn't learn that that's what you should do. You learned that's what you are already doing. That's the idea of metaethics. It's not to change your behavior. It's to give an account of what it is you already do. You can do all the things you're already doing, but on this more naturalistic view, you're not doing something that's rational in any capital R kind of way.
Well,
it is a sort of manipulation. It's about changing the world around you.
Doesn't this boil down into like the tolerance of intolerance kind of position?
Oh yeah, kill the fascists.
Well,
that's how you deal with them. That's how you deal with fascists. Is you kill them.
No, what I mean by that is to say, all right, so we have this like phenomena where we want to say we want to be, we're tolerant of people. Like we're tolerant of positions that we may not agree with, but really not. We're actually intolerant of those positions. Like I am intolerant of Nazis, but like we want to say we need to be tolerant of all positions. And so what we become is tolerant of intolerance, and that becomes kind of a contradiction. I don't think, Brenda, that there's any way around like even even if JHC is right, moral relativism, if you're right that there's some kind of objective facts about morals, I don't think that there's any way around the idea of being Machiavellian or bullying or threat of violence to achieve your goals.
Kate, it isn't so much that I think that there's objective facts. It's that I want to engage in settling moral disputes rationally rather than resorting to exercises of power, because I think that that's a bad direction to go in, because it leads to annihilation.
But how do you instantiate your position, right? So let's say you have...
I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking questions. I'm asking people.
Well, there's actually
in here. That's why I brought this up. It's because I don't know.
There's actually a book called Unbelievable Error, where the author says, of course, there's no such thing as rational moral discourse, but that's not believable, because as soon as you believe it, you're screwed. So he calls it unbelievable error because there's some evidence that humans literally can't even believe it. So in like a weird way, it'd be self-defeating. But it doesn't. Moral relativism, moral nihilism, none of these positions tell you what to do. All you have to do, if it bothers you that you're pretending to have a rational discourse about something that you know isn't really rational, then that's kind of up to you. But you don't have to. But you don't. have to let it affect you.
But
You
well,
can just
that's
say,
fine.
okay, well,
Let the streets flow with blood. I mean, that's fine, right?
well, manipulation doesn't always have to be mean, right? Parents can lovingly manipulate their children into doing the right thing. There's a lot of ways for you to pass your attitudes towards something like killing or stealing or being mean to a sibling. You can pass those on to other people without being violent. It still, in a way, is a sort of manipulation because you have to have the upper hand in some manner.
But there's
But it
still a
doesn't have
threat
to
of
be.
violence there, isn't there?
What's that?
There's still an inherent threat of violence there.
Yeah, obviously. But that doesn't mean that you have to use fear and domination with your children.
No. But like I'm like tossing around what I think Brenda is trying to say in my head, and I keep coming to the conclusion of like, let's take, say, like the Pope and the Ayatollah get together and they come to some kind of compromise in order to, you know, strike a peace deal between Islam and Catholicism. Right now, they've struck a compromise. They've looked at their books, they've talked to their scholars, and they figured out a way in which people, Muslims and Catholics, can coexist. But the only way for them to implement that compromise is with violence. Whether or not violence occurs or not, there's still a threat. You know, so we say, okay, this is how this can work. But then there's going to be people who are obviously going to react emotionally, who are going to say, well, I don't care if you compromise with the Pope, I'm still going to kill Catholics. And there are some Catholics who say, I don't care if you compromise with the Ayatollah, I'm going to still kill Muslims. And so the only way to prevent that, the only way to achieve your compromise is to, you know, be violent towards those who would, you know, do violence towards you. And I don't really think that they're anything that suffers from the human condition. I don't think there's any way around that. I think that everything at the end of the day comes down to an inherent threat of violence, whether it's used or not, in order to promote your goals.
Yeah, that's that's what we see like today, right? There are tribes that would murderously kill each other forever unless somebody steps in and say, "Stop it," right? Or you're not going to like what happens.
Mm-hmm.
How are we any different?
Well, not.
From the people who step in or from the people who kill each other?
Well, yeah, it's just tribalism, but it's on a different stage.
Well, depends what you mean by tribalism. So, in a lot of like Western democracies, we don't really have the opportunity to be tribalistic in the same way over the same things. So, generally, what Peter Singer calls like the expanding circle of empathy, and a lot of like, I guess, like, are you familiar with the weirds, right? The weird people, Western, educated, industrialized, rich Democrats.
Yeah, I like
Um,
that.
Western,
tend to have-
what was that again? Western educated what?
Industrialized, rich Democrats.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my
like-
tribe. That's my tribe. Yes.
Right.
And
We
we're going
tend
to
to
win.
have
We're going
really-
to win, and we're going to win by putting you down. Other people down.
Well,
We're
that
gonna-
doesn't actually seem to be the case. They seem to be winning the day, at least in some areas, by winning
Not
people
lately.
over with empathy.
Not lately. We don't seem to be winning.
Also, it's Democratic, not Democrats, like the party.
Yeah, democratic. Yeah.
Let's try to like think this out though, because I mean I think JHC, you agree with my position that violence is just inevitable. So
No, I don't think violence is inevitable.
Well, when I
think
say
it depends what you mean by violence,
Well,
but there is a powerful group that is leveraging their power over other people, even if that method is empathetic. there's some sort of threat of
Yes, that's what I mean. Just like
I'm
I
more
don't mean
powerful than you are.
yeah, I don't mean an actual threat of violence. Just like implied. You know, you don't pay
Sure.
your taxes. The IRS goes, and so is there another option? Is there something else that can be given to Brenda? Say, is there a way around that
Like power
implied threat of
relation.
violence? Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly there are. I mean, we see this quite often. We're either in the dark or we're so close in power levels, right, that we can't use any kind of force. And this is like supposedly foundations of like what Western capitalist economies, which is I have something you want, and I have too much of it, and I want this thing that you have on sale. So we're going to trade. And so because maybe there's not anything that I can do to you, there's very little that I can do to you, we come to some sort of understanding that we're going to be good to each other. We're going to be cool, and I'm going to try my best not to piss you off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either through like mutually assured destruction, where the only power that we have over the other is complete destruction and they have the same over us, or I have no advantages over you whatsoever. We can't destroy each other. We can just make each other's lives shittier. That the game theory works out that instead we should work with each other.
That was the only thing that I could think of was mutually assured destruction. But even then, mutually assured destruction is still predicated on a threat of violence.
Yeah, there's a lot of game theoretic solutions though to problems that don't involve violence or even implicit threats of violence because we have no ability like whatsoever to harm each other. Or we can't harm you with a cost to ourselves that's palatable. It would come at too high of a cost to ourselves, which is why like businesses can operate.
I mean, I have somewhat, I guess, dissonance in my head because, like, I want to say violence is bad, killing is bad, you know, but I recognize that even though while I want to say those things, probably the best and quickest, most efficient route to achieve what I think should happen is through violence. So I'm almost willing to say, yeah, this is my moral system, but I am absolutely willing to violate it to achieve my goals. And then is it really my moral system, or is it just some high ideological thing that I can point to and say, man, we could just get here. The world would be so much better.
No, I mean, I think that's unlikely. I mean, if there's like the best scenario would be something like a benevolent dictator. That's like really hard to guarantee. No, I don't. I mean, in a way, like I mentioned, ethical disputes is just the way that social strategizing becomes actionable. That's it. So anything that you find in a strategy, you can find some moral judgment for, either pro or against.
So then I guess let me ask you this. Instead of moral relativism, why not just be, I mean, why not hold the position even if morals exist, it doesn't matter? Like, who cares?
Well, I do hold that. Well, here's why. I don't want to just throw away morality. Because people... It really seems like saying X is moral or this is good and that's bad is a really powerful and almost indispensable part of the human experience. We're going to say it. We're going to keep saying it. So we need to just live with it. We need to come up with some kind of theory that accounts for people using it, when they use it. We can totally get rid of the idea, that we ought to cut, bits of wiener off children because God told us to, and therefore it's right. We have other really good explanations for why people did that. None of them have to do, with like God or anything like that. So I'm
So we hit the trifecta, didn't we? Abortion, war, and intactivism.
And FMG.
Yeah, that's right. And if you ask me, what do I think of female genital mutilation? I mean, obviously I despise it. Makes me feel icky. All these sorts of things. I would do whatever it takes to convince somebody not to do it. But my moral theory, my theory of what's going on, needs to include the data that there are cultures that think not only it's acceptable, but it's required. It's morally required to do that. And so I can either somehow say like, hey, we somehow hit on it and we're doing it right and we've got the best ethics, even though there's maybe some reasons to think that's not the case as well.
But
or we give up on it and come up with the most reasonable explanation, which is that the reason that people in this culture say that has a historical, biological, and social explanation. And how weird would it be if theirs had a historical, biological explanation and ours didn't?
There was a Iranian consult, premier, something like that. He said about America telling Iran they could not build a bomb, that it is wholly ridiculous to be lectured to by the only transgressor of nuclear catastrophe in human history twice.
Get wrecked.
Yeah, it's a smooth talking point.
So, JHC, it seems like a decent bit of what you're saying about morals seems to like coincide with what's known as post-truth. Have you heard about any of that stuff?
Yeah. I
So, like,
generally, so I'll just tell you what my positions on it are. Truth, I think, is not a flat concept. I think it's a word that expresses different things in different contexts. And
I agree.
and I don't think there's some flat understanding of it that's useful whatsoever. Even if it were useful, you'd be describing something else, not how in fact everybody is using it.
Yeah,
I know
and
that it's
so
true that
the whole,
better
but
COVID
I was more kind of gesturing towards the whole idea of like, yeah, dispensing with this idea that our morals are somehow universal or objective, and that we're just approaching this idea that it just works. It has an emotional appeal, and it's
That's just
useful.
pragmatic. That's not truth.
Hmm?
It's saying it's useful doesn't have anything to do with truth.
No, I know, no. But that's what post-truthism is all about. The whole idea is that people don't really care whether or not something is true. They just care whether or not it has some pragmatic value.
It sounds like some John shit.
It just sounds like it's care whether or not it's pragmatic.
No, it's not.
No, but I know, but there is a thing, like you can Google post-truth politics. I think it's like a proper noun, right?
It is.
As in this era, the Trump era, some like journalists have called it the post-truth era.
Well, even pre-Trump, but Trump has really punctuated it.
Right. But the idea is that it's called the post-truth era because nowadays Trump doesn't even gesture at trying to say things that are true. He just bullies, he bullshits, and doesn't even make an attempt to say things that are true. Yeah. He just says things to rile up his fan base.
Yeah, so he's more honest, and he's more honest, and he's doing it the right way, right? That
Well, right in
I
what
don't see.
sense?
Well, it's useful and it's effective. He's extremely
Well,
effective.
well, that's controversial whether it's useful or not,
It's
whether it's
besides the
effective.
point, Brenda.
It may
Really
it may
besides the
not
point.
be in the long term useful, right? It may be something that you can get away with in short amounts of time, but eventually, right, it seems like people are going to say, you know what, the strategy of just allowing people to say whatever they want didn't really work for us, so we're going to go back to something else.
I really
So there's a
doubt. I really doubt that Trump will suffer any adverse repercussions
Okay, who
at
cares
all.
about Trump? Holy crap, we weren't even talking about Trump.
Yes, we
I
are.
mean,
We're talking about it and consequences, and there
no,
will
look,
not be any
look, I just
consequences for
wanted to,
Trump.
I wanted to stay on the
Brenda, it
direct
wasn't about
discussion of
Trump. It's a
what,
fucking example.
yeah, it's a
It's
fucking
still the
Hey,
point, though. It's
let's not do that.
it's still the
We've had a
point, though. The
decent
point is,
conversation.
But so the thing about post-truth though is that I don't think that it's ever going to be possible to go back. I think that people just need to be equipped with the understanding of what it is and to embrace it as almost a new normal, essentially. So, where post-truth doesn't mean anti-truth, from my understanding. It just means that it's the realization that appealing merely to statistics or some kind of factual basis is just wholly ineffective, and that you can create these kinds of pragmatic emotional appeals that are based in the statistics, but that they kind of are more focused on the, like you were saying, the vision crafting, the image crafting that you're talking about.
yeah,
How is that different from pragmatism?
I'm aware that well, it might be pragmatism,
There's
but
strength.
again,
There's
it's
strengths
the
of pragmatism.
it's
Yeah.
it's called post-truth politics. Whether or not it's
Yeah.
really just pragmatism, that's like
Well,
the
there's
proper noun
post-truth
that
proper.
describes.
There's post-truth proper as well. It's just that post-truth politics is under the
Right.
umbrella of post-truth.
In 2016, post-truth was chosen as Oxford Dictionary's word of the year because people were tossing it around so much. So it's a word that whatever it really means may not really mean anything now, but it's a part of like the lingo. And do I think that there's going back? I actually do. I'm kind of I'm cynical in the sense that I don't really think much changes. And maybe, I mean, certainly people could say like, you're just like a middle class white dude. Of course, nothing changes for you. But Trump changed a lot of things for other people. But as far as like the national conversation goes, I think that there's evidence that people are just as tribalistic as they ever were when it came to their favorite political party. And everybody's willing to accept lies as long as it means their guy gets in or girl.
Well, yeah,
But there are,
I think you're missing the forest for the trees though here. But I'll let you finish.
well, I think that there are disturbing. There are some more disturbing consequences. Actually, Ezra Klein just wrote a book about this, where he said it's not that people are politicized. It's that the political that's weird and they're willing to accept like lies. The biggest worry now is that the political divide is much wider than it's been. But they've always been cheerleaders for their favorite person, come what may.
yeah.
So
But
no, so I don't know if the
but-
political divide can be. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Well, what I was wanting to say is that, so, like I said, I think that this whole move towards post-truth has been going on for much longer than even 2016. I mean, obviously 2016, Obama was still in office. And the point is that I think that you almost have to go back towards like the Enlightenment to kind of understand a lot of these trends, because there there's almost like kind of four different modes of thinking, I think, in humanity. So there's like a pre-symbolic era where, humans didn't even have writing and that kind of stuff. And then there was the symbolic era where knowledge was captured in these ancient books, like the Bible or the Torah. And then during the Enlightenment, there was this rejection of this like handed down knowledge and a embracing of rationalism and skepticism. And I think now there is kind of this now fourth turning, where, like I said, people are no longer seem to fetishize rationalism and skepticism because they're so acutely aware of its limitations, and it's almost uselessness sometimes in day-to-day life. uh, and I think that there's going to be, like I've been saying, a re-embracing of belief and thought based around how it affects you, rather than, oh, here's the statistics. So, like, like with the
Yeah.
abortion thing, like, I don't think anybody's going to be really swayed one way or the other with, like, oh, we'll be able to reduce the causes of death from abortion by X% if we legalize it, blah blah blah. They're just,
Yeah.
they're just going to be,
We could.
um no, but I'm not saying that that wouldn't happen. I'm just saying that nobody generally is convinced by these kinds of pointy-haired statistical arguments. What they're
Mm.
actually convinced by is uh, picture creation and emotional appeal. And I think that that's here to stay. I don't think that
I'm not convinced.
um,
I'm not convinced.
Well,
I think rationalism as a way of governing your life is extremely useful. It's been extremely useful to me in this pandemic. The rational response has been very successful for me, and I see a lot of people responding
okay,
irrationally,
look, okay,
and that's
but
not
you're
working out for them at
misunderstanding what I'm
all.
saying,
That's not
Brenda.
working out for
As
them. You
usual, you're
said
misunderstanding what I'm
rationalism.
saying.
Listen, you said rationalism isn't a good way to run your life.
No, that's not what I said. It's not a good
That's
way to
literally
convince
what you
people.
said.
No, I said it's not a good way to convince people. So look,
no, I
Brenda,
think
look,
so. Let
what
me.
what do you think? Okay, really quick, really quick. Brenda, what do you think is going to be more convincing to the general public? Oh, we'll be able to reduce deaths by 30% if we engage in social distancing habits. Or do you want your grandma to die? Like,
Um,
which one is going to be more convincing to someone?
I think that when you presuppose that people have been taught how to think critically and skeptically, that the rational explanation will be more successful than the emotional appeal.
Everybody in the Western world has been taught that pretty much. The whole weird
No,
thing accounts for like 15% of the world's population.
Yeah, I think that you both can be right in a way. I think that it pays for people to be rational in their own like space.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
problem
Agreed.
the problem is not necessarily that people are becoming dumber when it comes to really big issues. It's that
Yeah,
with the amount of information, with the amount of work that you have to put to understand an
exactly.
issue, and
Yeah,
at the scale, the global scale, you get very diminishing return. So to
yeah, it's called
understand how climate
rational
change
ignorance.
works becomes very difficult. So that's why politicians are, in some sense, rational to stop trying to explain policy decisions or stop trying to beat their opponents in a rational manner because
but
it's really hard and
Yeah,
it's really hard to convince
but
people in a 5 minute speech when they're just going to run your opponent's going to
yeah,
run a 10-second hit piece about how you're a fat idiot.
yeah, but being didactic like that isn't the only way to be rational or to convince somebody rationally. There are methods to change people's minds that work.
Brenda, who have you ever convinced?
That's irrelevant. That's
Well,
irrelevant.
let's
Look, I'm just
personal-
saying. Like,
that's a
I'm just saying.
personal
So,
attack
JHC,
response.
would you?
There are, in
Yeah,
fact,
look, and I'm saying it's very
ways.
effective. Like,
There are,
I don't think that you're very
excuse
good
me,
at those kinds
asshole.
of things.
Shut
It
up.
shows.
hold.
Yeah, get hold, Brad.
There are, in fact,
but
there
JHC, what
are,
you're
in
talking
fact,
about
there are,
was
in fact,
rational
ways
ignorance.
of
One
convincing
sec, Brenda.
people.
Look,
Let Brenda
Excuse me.
speak, please, Ace.
I am
Oh my
talking.
God.
Ace talks over me
Just
because
a
it's a
fucking
political
monologue.
agenda of his to
Please
do
let
that.
Brenda speak.
There are,
No,
in
it's
fact,
not.
there are, in fact,
Just think you're
ways.
dumb.
He doesn't shut up. There are, in fact, ways of changing people's minds using a specific system, right? To do so, and it's not emotional manipulation or anything like that. It's a very systematic way. And it's been researched in universities of
Ooh,
approaching people
some
and
diversities.
getting them to lower their defenses and accept new information inside, allow new information to come in, and then once they can do that, then they will reach a rational conclusion, not an emotional one, but a rational one, and that can be done.
Okay. Well, anyway, so JHC, what you were talking about is what's known as rational ignorance. It's like the diminishing returns on rational inquiry. So, like, I could spend my entire life looking at all the policy positions of all the politicians and just spend hours and hours and hours a day, like, keeping up with all the new information that's coming out. Or I could just be like, fuck it, I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders. Who the fuck cares what he did in the past?
Well, yeah. So rational ignorance, I mean, is certainly like a very viable like strategy for maximizing like personal well-being.
Mhm.
Like it's like min-maxing, right? You're just
Yeah,
gonna min-max
exactly.
your character set. I'm gonna be really good at computer science. I'm gonna be really good at what I don't know, something else. And I'm not gonna pay any attention to politics because at the end of the day, I get one vote if I spend 1 billion hours in books or 0 hours in books trying to figure this shit
Exactly.
out. So
Exactly.
you actually do get weird incentives in a democratic system to remain rationally ignorant. Now, I don't take Trump to be the result necessarily of some like long evil process. It just every once in a while somebody finds the cheat code that they'll try to patch up, and in this case, it was kind of he's like a Gish Galloper when it comes to lying. He can just say things that have like a bit of truth or no truth, but what he found out is if you just say enough of it, everybody is scrambling and people just stop caring. And what ends up becoming sound bites are throw him out of here, right? Back in the old days,
Build the
this guy to get
wall,
his
throw
ass
her in
beat up.
jail.
Right.
Yeah.
Very short sound
Yeah.
bites that are memorable. They stick in your head. And while journalists and these other people are running around trying to fact check these things that he say, he's already on to the next thing.
Exactly.
And it's a very, it obviously works as a strategy. Do I think that we'll see the end of it? My guess is that there are certain institutions that will say we don't like this, and they're going to look at some way of patching it up, even if it means we're going to punish the party that put him in, so that if they ever think about running somebody like that again, we're going to pull all the institutional strings we can.
Well, I'm not so sure that the party heads in the GOP wanted Trump in. The base wanted him in.
Wait, he's he's like a walking viral video, right? Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I agree. I agree with Brenda to a certain extent here. So, JHC, I think you're telling half the story. I think that you're right that Trump institutionalized the sprinting Gish Gallop, But the other thing is that there was another cheat code that he caught on, which was, the resentment of the working class, especially the middle class, in say like the Rust Belt and other places where because of globalism they had their jobs outsourced, things like that. So it wasn't just the sprinting gish gallop that Trump did that made him win. I think there was also a genuine resentment that he had picked up on that he used to further his platform.
Well, he said the script out loud that you're not supposed to say out loud. He said the things out loud that the leadership of the GOP has been, dog whistling all this time, and then the base heard it without the dog whistle, and that was a relief to them. That was a confirmation. Yes, he's one of us, and he's willing to say it out loud, and so we love that, and I think that's part of it. Another part is that the GOP sees him, or the religious right sees him, as a means of getting abortion overturned, and they're willing to they don't care about anything else other than getting abortion overturned, and he's the means to that end.
But yeah, the thing is that, I mean, what I did earlier when you were like, oh, there's these university studies that, have shown that you can like sit someone down and rationally like explain something. Like it took you like a full like 25 seconds to like get that out, and then I took 2 seconds to say, well, who have you ever convinced? And just look at like the level of effectiveness between like
That's
those two
irrelevant.
things. No, no, it's completely relevant to the discussion
No,
because the
it's
kinds
it's
of
not.
things. No, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. I can spend 2 seconds to say a quick quip that, in the minds of most people, will make you look stupid, versus like you trying to like sit down and rationally explain something that people are going to be half asleep by the time you're done with.
But it's still irrelevant.
No, it. Oh my God, you're
It
so dumb.
is. It's not
You're so
relevant.
dumb.
It's not relevant to
It
the
is
point.
relevant.
Whether or not I've
Yeah, it
ever,
is relevant.
you don't know that I've not convinced anybody.
No
Because
shit.
I
That's the
have.
whole point.
Because
Of
I
course,
have.
it's a complete fucking non sequitur. I know. Who cares? It's not the point is not that it's a non sequitur. The point is that when it comes to the kinds of gut reactions that people have to this kind of stuff, my kind of stuff, where it's just quick, short, and quippy, and it appeals to people's emotions, is gonna win out every
No,
single time
I don't
over
think so.
dry
No, I
academic
don't.
nonsense.
It's not dry
Well,
academic
you're fucking
nonsense for one
delusional.
thing, right? And you're wrong. Yours is simply the troll tactic, and that's a short-term game.
Well,
Yes,
yeah.
it is. It
It's
is a troll
also
tactic. I've got my missiles aimed
it's
at
also
you.
very possible that it's also very possible that there's a flash in the pan, there's a one-off, and we all think it's a changing of the guard and everything has changed. I'm not really willing to say that yet. I know everybody thinks that politics has changed irreversibly so, but long-term trends, I still don't know. It's very possible
Yeah.
that there were random factors involved, right? That lightning struck twice in the same spot, and he talked to the right people at the right time, that they overcame a 3 million voter deficit to get in all the right states, coupled with the Democratic Party's complete failure to have people in leadership that have any brains whatsoever, and they don't visit key states, right? It could just be, you know, a lucky number of fuck ups.
Well, I
That's
think in the
possible.
case
But I'm
in
not
the
talking about it's politics. Hey, one sec, Brenda. One sec. I gave you the floor. Just give me the floor.
I've
I mean,
already
I'm not.
paused.
Okay, thanks. So I don't think it just has to do with politics, though. I think that this has to do much more broadly with the way that people interact with the world, not just with like how politicians compose themselves.
The problem, I think, JHC, is that Clinton was a spectacularly bad politician. She's just a bad politician, and she was surrounded. Her campaign was run by numbers people who based their decisions on polling and data massaging, and instead of having good political instincts based on the local political environment and sort of a gut understanding of how politics is done. And that's why she made the mistake, for instance, of not campaigning in certain areas where she probably could have tipped the election, like in, say, Wisconsin and other places. She made the decision not to campaign there based on numbers and polls, but somebody with good political instincts would have ignored that and would have gone and campaigned there.
Yeah, it's just a number of things. It's like large scale macro social explanations are really difficult to come up with.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm sure all of that contributed to it. But it's possible that this is all a meme and it'll all go back to normal in just a couple months here, right? And this will be like, what the fuck? People will be like, what the fuck happened when that guy won? Right?
The next
Republican might. Yeah, the next Republican might be Mitt Romney, right? And he's just overtly like, hey guys, I think people are paying too much in taxes, and I'd like to give some of that money back to them.
Mitt Romney will never be. He'll never even be a nominee in the GOP because he's a Mormon. He needs to renounce.
Wait,
He's a Mormon. He is never going to be
I don't.
a nominee in the GOP.
you think that's enough to?
Yeah,
They
I
voted
do.
for Trump.
He's
they
not
voted
a
for
Christian.
Trump.
He's not a Christian.
I think Romney he has a way of delivering words that I think will like he'll find a way to work around. I don't think they're gonna care that much that he's a Mormon.
No.
I don't.
He was.
We'll see. It would be
he was-
weird. It'd be weird to vote for a Mormon. I agree. There's a lot of people, but if Christians can be like, sometimes God finds his, I don't know, who's somebody evil that he used in history? Saul, right? I mean, he's not evil, but he was God's chosen, and at the end, he was disgraced, right? If God can find his Saul, there's probably a better example, or his Herod, whatever.
Yeah, I think that I just don't think that I think that what Romney needed to do was to renounce his Mormonism, because he was asked in his campaigns, he was directly confronted with his Mormon faith and its past, which is really ugly, and he refused to address it, right? And that's why he lost. That's why he couldn't get the nomination. And it's the same with Bernie Sanders. It's the same with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders refused to confront and renounce his ties to communism and to the more uglier parts of socialism. He just didn't want to deal with it. He was confronted about it, and he punted on it. Unlike, say, Elizabeth Warren, who did renounce socialism. And given the U.S. political climate, that's enough to prevent you from winning the nomination of your party.
That's interesting. I mean, maybe I'm with a specific circle who doesn't like talk about some of those things, but the main things I remember was Flip Flop Romney and like Binders for the Woman. I remember like a lot of the. I just don't remember any.
And the dog
Mormon-based-
on top of the car with the poop. That was one. Remember that? The dog incident? So being mean to or disrespectful or insensitive to his pet dog was a pretty big deal.
Okay, that's interesting. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But I don't know. Let's see. What's interesting? I think we can actually take that like for some reason people took the Trump he's super honest thing and ran with it. I think we can kind of do this thing with Biden, even though it sounds weird. If you turn him into like the because people are attacking him as like dementia or whatever. Maybe if you take it as like like silly old like old Uncle Joe. You know what I mean? Oh look at what he. I don't know. I feel like there's a way you can turn Biden to make him popular, but I don't know. But that's just speculation on my part. I don't know.
I don't care who the Dems put up. I'm voting for whoever or even whatever they put up. I'm ticking that box.
I see.
Yeah, yeah. He has to be removed.
Yes.
And then what's because like and then kind of just going off what I said because Trump very much became a meme, right? But I do see like these so like you know how Joe Biden says these weird things like malarkey and like you know what I mean and like those weird stories he tells. Like I think he can be memed. Like I think Biden can really be memed, and I think if we like utilize that, like using what made Trump popular against him, it doesn't even have to be Biden. Well, obviously it's going to be right, but just in like in reference, meming is very good for like meme candidates. It's weird, but it works. It's weird. I don't know.
Well, comedians are happy with the choices because they're going to win